Happy Friday. It is another Mavens of Manufacturing Day, and I'm super excited to be back in Wisconsin after spending a lot of time at the Robotics Summit and Expo in Boston. I'm going to be releasing an article sometime next week about my key takeaways and favorite moments from that show. And we're going to be talking about Automate today because we have Emily Ting with us. She is from CCS America. And one of the things I love about this show is we're bringing on women who didn't necessarily plan on being in engineering and manufacturing, but they sort of fell into it. So, Emily, hello. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Emily, can you start off with, just a brief description of who you are and what your role is at CCS America and how that whole journey started for you?
Yeah, for sure. I am Emily Ting. I work as the marketing communications person at CCS America. We are the US office of a Japanese machine vision lighting manufacturer. If you're not familiar with machine vision, because it's a niche part of industrial automation, it's when, the camera or the sensor is being used to perform like an automated task. Maybe you're looking for defects, and we build lighting that is dedicated to helping you see your camera see whatever feature it's trying to look at, whether it's a barcode or a defect. And so my role is to help plan and execute our marketing strategy. So that encompasses like our trade shows or any events that we put on, um, articles, blogs, LinkedIn,
Mhm.
all of that is managed by the marketing team within CCS America. And you asked how I ended up in this role. It was my first job out of college, and kind of founded by like friend of my dad's, basically. I was looking for a role where that involved marketing because I was interested in it, but also a role where I could use my Japanese, since I spent 8 years of my life studying it from high school to through college, and I was like, I really don't want to forget all of that right after I graduate. Which pointed me to CCS America, and they weren't looking for a marketer at the time, but it was something they had always kind of wanted to work, put more resources towards, work, put a bit more focus on. And so that's how, they hired me. And then, the plan was to hire me within the US so that I could go train in their office in Japan for 2 years. And that's, where I started to learn a lot about maybe some of the technical stuff that we'll talk about today. But I
Yeah.
definitely did not have, the background in, the physics of light and how that all worked before I joined.
Yeah. Did you ever do like an internship while you were in college getting your degree with some other type of company that wasn't so technical?
Yeah, I think when I was in college and there was a point where I was studying abroad in Japan, I was doing like, blogs for a travel or tourism, or just like people living in Japan.
Mhm.
It was, so again, not very technical content, but again, always trying to keep the connection with Japan in there.
Yeah. So when you first started, were you at all intimidated by the technical space? And was there any moment where you were like, what did I just get myself into?
At the start, I don't think I was intimidated by the technical side. It was just, my first job, and, I was comfortable making mistakes, but I also was like, I don't want this to go like humiliatingly badly, where I like epically screw up, right?
Right.
And it like damages all my future career prospects for the rest of my life. That was probably like the big fear at the start.
Yeah.
Um, but once I get to Japan, I think that's maybe where it got a lot harder, because suddenly, I'm trying to learn everything in a second language also, right? And they're not
Mhm.
teaching you like what is, or they're not teaching you the words for like Lambertian diffusion or like radiant exitance in my college Japanese class, that's for sure. So, um,
Yeah.
my I remember vividly this, like, I asked a question to, a coworker so that he and when he was explaining, the answer to me, and it was a technical answer, I, like, did not understand a word of what he said. I could tell at times, like, "Oh, he's saying some kind of verb, but I don't know what type of verb this is." And then, I went back to, like, look up. He said this, like, one word over and over again, and then I realized that was the word for semiconductor in Japanese. So I was like, "Oh, he was talking about, like, how, semiconductors," and then I could, like, look up, he said this word, and it's like, "Oh, that sounds about right," but, I could see how this relates to semiconductors, or then I could just, study up on
Yeah.
conductors, but that was just like I felt so bad for, like, the whole 5 minutes of listening to his answer, and it's just like, I don't know anything, like, I don't understand a single thing of what you're saying.
How long was that process for you? That we were getting comments coming in too. So real quick, Nikki came in on the wrong profile. She said, "Hey ladies, can't wait to see y'all in a couple of weeks at Automate. Super excited to see you again, Nikki." Greg said CCS America makes some great vision
Aw,
lighting.
thank
That's
you.
awesome. Greg, thank you for that testimony. And then she said wrong profile. Technical language is different than conversational. I don't feel confident having technical conversations in my other languages, Spanish and Icelandic. And I didn't know you spoke Spanish, Nikki.
I
That's a
didn't know you
cool.
spoke Icelandic, that's even cooler.
Well, she's from Iceland. She's originally from
Oh,
there.
I did not
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah, and she makes a good point because Becca Resnick said the same thing because she translates technical documents from German and Japanese to English, and
Right.
she said it can really be hard to kind of figure out what they're saying in that one language. And she's like, "This is why."
Exactly. I
She's like,
struggle
"You,
with that too. For
yeah,"
sure.
but I think it's really cool that like you have cross cultural experience with marketing because and I don't think a lot of people are privy to this, especially in the US, because sometimes we can be caught up in our own bubble. But the way we market things is completely different than how Europe and Asia do it. And then there's like some standards as well. So can you kind of touch on that a little bit? Like how has that experience coming from here in the United States and then spending some time in Japanese really helped up like your marketing game? Because you're not just marketing to America, you're marketing to all over the world.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. I think, now we try to focus more of like in the Americas, even if it might bleed out. But when I was in Japan, that was definitely like we're trying to kind of, reach the whole global audience as like the overseas marketing team. And that meant, basically anywhere in the world outside of Japan. Um, and yeah, it was tricky, because US market is different from Europe's market, which is different from, Asia's market,
Mhm.
um, and let me think, I guess, you know, again, because I was so new back then, my
Mhm.
big fear was, like, the way I'm going to interpret something is not the way that others are going to or interpret it or even what was originally meant in the in the original language. And usually I was like working off of like a machine translation, or they had hired some translator to do the English translation from the Japanese translation, and then they just wanted me to check it, and I just like reading this and I'm just like I'm not sure what it's trying to say, and is that just because I'm not a technical person and a technical
Yeah.
person would understand what this means, or is this just actually like non nonsensical or like incomprehensible. um so that was a tough line to kind of figure out, and if I'm honest, I question sometimes if I have actually figured it out or not. But so that was a
Well,
big challenge.
let's dive into that because sometimes I get questioned as a technical writer not having engineering background, and I'm like, I don't need an engineering background. That's not where my skill set is. And sometimes I have to fight for myself to explain to people why I'm a good tech writer. So how has your non-technical background actually helped you connect with broader audiences? Because I feel like we do have some advantages lacking that experience or that limitation of I don't know if you're familiar with the show, but there's a show out there where it's these younger chefs from anywhere from the age of 5 to 12 going up against veteran chefs. And
Right.
sometimes these kids outcook these veteran chefs, but I feel like it's because they haven't been limited to any kind of study or training. So they think more outside of the box and they are willing to take more risk because they're just curious. And I feel like that can be applied to some of the non-technical people in this space and why we're so good at our job. So what are some of the advantages of you not being a technical person and how it helped you actually connect better with broader audiences and be a better marketer for CS?
Yeah. The obvious one that comes to mind is like you're not afraid to ask like the
Mhm.
questions that, they all know the answers to, or you're just like, I have no idea what this means. Can you explain what this is and why it's important? Why would people care about this? But I think probably one of the most important things that has helped like for the role of marketing is like being able to identify like certain topics or certain like, you know, um I don't want to call it a workaround, let's say, but
Mhm.
one thing we come up against often in the industry is like, case studies, and like we want to create case studies because we want to show our expertise, but then we're always coming up against like NDAs on projects, or like the customer says, sure, we'll work with you on this, but then it kind of like takes longer because it's not like high on their priority list. um
Mhm.
and so in that kind of in those circumstances, one day I kind of thought, well, hey, why don't we, if the thing we want to prove is like we know how to help you, figure out what light you need for a given, application you're trying to do, let's just, instead of waiting for a case study where we could talk about this to fall into our laps, which will probably never happen. Instead, let's just explain like, here's what we do in the lab, or what our application engineers are doing in the lab every time they get an application. So like, what do they do first? What are they looking for when they're testing lights? How do they know like this is a good image versus a bad image? And just,
Mhm.
turn that into like, we call them like mock case studies, because, we take
Mhm.
something off the shelf that like was never an application, but then we had our technical marketing manager, who is a former applications engineer, just like walk through her process, and that way we could prove like, oh, this is what we do, and like you can kind of show um, your knowledge or like your experience without having to wait for the traditional, let's say, um, method to kind of appear, because sometimes it never will, because it's all hidden behind non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah.
um, so
I
that
get so I
that's
get
been
so
like
frustrated with this.
yeah, so you have to get creative, and I think when you're outside of the industry, as long as you're like double checking, is this legal for us to do, um or not, as long as it's not illegal and not in bad form, then
Mhm.
like you know it's a viable solution that's worth considering.
Mhm. I love that you have such a close partnership too with your technical marketer because I think that's like a good balance on how you get the creative with the technical stuff and then she can check that information. But I think one of the important things in our industry, and what really makes people successful is that characteristic of curiosity. So how important is curiosity when you're in a role that bridges technical and non-technical audiences together?
Oh, it's so important. I think it's especially tough when like I think it can be hard sometimes to get the information or the answers you like really need out
Mm-hmm.
of an engineer. So you have to like persevere and ask like the same question, maybe like five different ways in order to like get the response that helps you dive deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it it's also just as important as curiosity is probably like observation skills. Um, or just being able to like notice like, oh, they're talking about this thing as if it's like super obvious, but it's not obvious to me. Or you know they're talking about this certain challenge they're facing. Could we possibly turn that into a content moment somehow? Like they explain like you know why this kind of thinking is bad, or like what's the misunderstanding here that the customer might have, but
Mm-hmm.
actually it's like the reality is like this, and could we turn that into a teaching moment that will build trust, and also we can share with people on social, and then build trust with 100x the number of people, instead of just like these one-to-one email conversations we're dealing with like on the daily.
Yeah. One of the other things too, I think, is really challenging for manufacturers because some of our stuff can get really technical. It doesn't feel approachable for people outside of the sector. So, do you have any like tips for some of our listeners on how you balance the need for accuracy with making sure the message still feels approachable, especially to like anyone outside of the sector? I know there's this big push of like making, I hate this term because I don't think sexy should be used with manufacturing, but some people are like,
Yeah.
oh, make manufacturing sexy or make it cool. But you still want to maintain that authenticity and also the accuracy of the technical information. So do you have tips on how to maintain that balance, but yet still make it approachable for anybody outside of the sector or who might be not as technical?
Yeah, I feel bad like giving this answer because it feels like, so blasé in our current era, but like AI has definitely helped me a lot in terms of, you know, um, not just like explaining concepts to me, like, there's that prod where like explain this to me as if I'm, like a
I'm
child
Fry.
or something, something, or, like explain this, but keep the readability at like an eighth or ninth grade level. Or if you have a strong asset of like understanding your ideal customer, and like what they care about, what their jobs are on the day to day, and you like
Mhm.
feed that to your AI tool of choice, and say like, hey, like we have this product that does like XYZ. How would phrase that, like the value of those features to the like this specific type of job persona based on what they're doing on the day to day, and that kind of explanation can help um be a good jumping off point or inspiration for take that, and then like um add your company uh
Mhm.
voice to that explanation.
So I think that's a good, interesting point too, because a lot of people I think don't understand the importance of voice and tone or know how to like get a hold of that. Because I feel like some of these marketing messages that see from certain companies, they sound very robotic and just
Like
non-human. So
corporate speak.
yes, yes, and it's just like that's not how you talk in real life. So I, I'm trying to find a way how to answer this too, because it just comes naturally for me to like sit down and have personal conversations with someone, and it doesn't take long for me to get their voice in my head. So like when I'm writing, I just imagine them talking to me, and that's like
Yeah.
how I do it. But I'm sure there's like a technical way that I can find to like explain it. But like, how do you capture the voice and tone for CCS? Like, how do you collaborate with the engineers and the technical experts to capture that, but also make it sound authentic and not scripted?
Yeah. I think it actually, it helps that like we have, our engineers and again, like take our technical marketing manager, for example. A lot of
Mhm.
times what's happening is like she's creating something like or recording something and that generates the transcript.
Oh,
And so like that, she that like has her like speaking style embedded into it already or like her tone of voice and it's not too far off or it's not like w- wildly off base from like a, an appropriate business voice,
yeah,
let's say. So it's not too hard to like just um take her transcript and like incorporate that like her way of speaking.
yeah.
As long as I like get rid of the stuff that sounds like a little too pop culture, let's
Oh,
say.
for sure.
But once you take that stuff out, the, if you have somebody who explains concepts really clearly or like that is like really easy for you to understand, um,
Mhm.
then it's easy to like take their explanations or their tone of voice and just incorporate that into like your content writing.
I think that's a great process to just sit down and have a recorder, and then not worry so much about getting every piece of information in your own notes, but just having that natural conversation and letting the recorder pick it up and then going over it a few times. Because that's, I basically do that with my Zoom meetings, and it's helpful because you can go back and like listen to the inflections of their voice too. Because I think that's one of the hardest parts with like written text is you lose the voice inflections, and so many people get mad at reading a text wrong, right? So like you don't want to read marketing material wrong either, because it can just be bad for your brand overall. What
Yeah.
do you think is the biggest mistakes companies are making when trying to market their technical products?
Uh, I think one thing that sticks out is like when you're just feature dumping and I think especially as like a non-marketer, or that I don't know, they might think that's okay, but you know,
Mhm.
I look at this list of stuff and it's just like, uh, okay, so what? Like this kind of means nothing to me, or maybe even an engineer is like saying, okay, um, what in this list is actually like important for me to know. Maybe you're just like advertising, you offer something just for the sake of saying it, but maybe they don't care or like, and by putting it out there, you're like confusing them, making them think, oh, is this something important when it like really isn't something they need
Yeah.
to be worrying about or something for their specific like use case is not important.
Yeah.
And you're asking them to do a lot of the like what's the word, like understanding themselves instead of just like making it plain and simple for them.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight, because it's not so much about like I mean, I don't think a lot of people care about the features. They just want to know what is it about those features that are helping solve their problem that they have. So they might care about some of them, but if it's not applying to the problem that they have, then why are they going to read through all those bullet points? I think that's a great insight for you. When it comes to like the biggest challenges that you've faced through your journey at CCS, you did talk about like how you went to Japan and then learning the language, and then trying to interpret some of that information into English, and not like missing any of the vital information. Are there any other challenges that you faced throughout your journey there, or just trying to learn how to really market technical products?
Yeah, I think another challenge is, like marketing internally or just like explaining the
Mm.
why behind we're doing things to like the rest of the company, like I think it's like understandable because, like sales and engineering, or at least in our company, because we don't have like the R&D function here. That's in Japan. So like right here, like the engineers and salespeople are just like handling problems or fires as they come. Like they
Mhm.
have to look at like what's right in front of them. But marketing's role is to like take a step back and see like, okay, like what is everything that happened that led up to, this moment of you dealing with this thing? Was it like, for example, how did this customer hear about us? How did they decide that like we we were the vendor to go with? You know, why are they asking this question? Do many people ask this question?
Mhm.
And then, from there we're kind of reverse engineering. Okay, maybe we like make content about this to explain this concept, or maybe we put this piece of content, in a media publication, or on social, because that's where our target audience is spending their time. um
Mhm.
or instead of just like feature dumping all the time on LinkedIn, we're working in some like educational content also, because people aren't going on LinkedIn to like shop for their next machine or their next lighting product necessarily. That's part of it, but you know that's not all there is to it. And so sometimes it's like when you're trying to justify, oh, could you like get this particular image that we need for this particular asset, it's like you have to explain it to them, like why we need this, why it's
Mhm.
worth their time, even though it like this particular picture isn't going to necessarily win us a deal, but like it's an important part of a like greater story that we're trying to tell, that builds trust with people, so that they come to us eventually when they have a need for lighting.
Yeah, I was on another podcast and we were talking about the importance of building trust with customers right now, especially like even if they don't end up being your customer, you still want to try to build that brand loyalty because someone who might not need your products or services, they're still going to like your personality and what you're doing and then refer to you because word of mouth is still a thing. So, like, even if you can't be the right company for a customer, um there might be someone else out there that is, and when you like help them that way as well, they'll really appreciate that and then they'll refer other people to you because you were transparent with them. So I feel like there's a lot more collaboration going on, and I think those stories are really important to tell too. But I want to know what you're currently working on, like during your time at CCS, like what has been like one of your favorite projects that you worked on, and what has been like one of your biggest wins there at the company?
Biggest project, or uh, project I like most. I mean, one that sticks out and it kind of relates to all that we've been talking about is, um, there's this certain webinar we did a few years back. It's called Common Pitfalls of Machine Vision Lighting, and you can watch it on YouTube if you want. But that one was basically like I, would always like chat with our applications engineer while he was, working on certain projects, and he would always be like, oh, I'm working on this one, but I had to start all over because like the customer didn't tell us that it had to be like installed this far away from the sample, and suddenly the thing I was originally going to tell them would be the solution is not going to be the right solution. And those sorts of scenarios happened like all the time. And so I was like, again, uh, this circles back to what I said before about like you have to
Mhm.
notice these things, and look out for them and see if there's an opportunity, for marketing to turn that into something. And so, I went to our technical marketing manager and said like, hey, could you just like, I think this would be a good webinar topic where you just like talk about like all the mistakes that you see, or like the misconceptions that all our customers have about lighting that you see come up like when you're doing these application evaluations. And you know uh just vent basically. And then we'll explain like all those misconceptions and like what is the reality, and turn that into a teaching moment. And that has been like, one of our best webinars to date, or like most reused, recycled webinars today, because we'll give the presentation at like a customer's show, for example. We also have just started working on, what we call technical roundtables. So that's like a 1 day technical training event that we will like put on, around the country. And basically just, it's like a crash course on everything like our application engineers need to know to do their jobs, like the physics of lighting and how that all gets applied in machine vision. These common mistakes that, people in the industry sometimes, have like these incorrect assumptions about, and like how the engineers like actually solve applications. And then we pair that with a hands-on section where they can like take everything they just learned and like try to solve,
Yeah,
application examples that we've made up. So
that's really
that
cool.
webinar became a building block for this event that we're doing now. And we did one, or the first one, earlier this year in Texas, and we're hoping to do, a couple more, throughout the
Oh, so
country later this year. Yeah.
you're traveling. Is it offered online too, or is it just in person?
We decided to make it in person only because, like, by doing hands-on, like applying everything you've learned, it's
Yeah,
easy to like, listen to a presentation or listen to a
yeah,
webinar and think you understand it, but then like seeing it, or like doing it yourself in real life is like when the aha moment really comes for a lot of people. So
yeah.
we decided to make that an in-person only thing.
That's really cool. I'm starting to see more of that kind of activity and interaction happening. And I think it's really beneficial because of how quickly things are advancing. And, I think those types of courses and workshops really help. And it's great networking too.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's awesome. I'm super excited for you around that. And if you can share more information, I can put that in the summary article after this because I think people would want to sign up and learn more how they can get involved. Um, so you did mention AI and that you've used it for some of your stuff. Where do you see the future of technical marketing heading, especially with trends like AI and video content ramping up? Because I see videos everywhere now, and everybody's talking about videos. I've gotten asked way too many times, "Are you afraid that you're going to lose your job?" And I'm like, "No, because written content's always going to be a thing." Um, some people
Yeah.
don't believe me, but I'm just like, nope, it's always going to be a thing. You're going to need a writer for first up. But where do you see technical marketing trending towards?
Uh, I think what's going to set, like, the amazing content apart, or like the amazing content creators apart from the like okay content creators, is maybe like, you know, are you talking about the topics, or are you answering the questions that everybody wants to know the answer to, but for some reason, like nobody has ever like answered it for them, or maybe they answered like the one person who asked it to their face, and then never shared it with the wider audience. I, for example, I mentioned um, how we have a presentation on like the physics of light. We call it lighting principles. And as amazing a presentation as it is, or like it's good evergreen content,
Mhm.
it's the kind of stuff that probably like any lighting manufacturer would you know have some kind of like white paper or their own version of the training of like that kind of information. Um, and if everybody has their own version of that, if they're all sharing that, then you're not going to stand out. So you
Mm.
have to start looking for, expand beyond just like that, like evergreen basic fundamental information, or like the trendy topics like industry 4.0 or whatever. Like if those are your only two like topic clusters, that's not going to be enough to set you apart, or build trust, let's say. You have to
Yeah.
That's why it's like important to pay attention to like what questions are getting asked a lot, or like the things that once you've developed like a certain level of expertise, like you're no longer like an absolute beginner, but you're nowhere near an expert, like where the like knowledge gaps still between like you and like your subject matter experts, and are any of those gaps like things that should be filled for the sake of your customer, like your customer should know this, or
Yeah.
like should think this way, instead of having all these like bad assumptions about how lighting works. For
Yeah.
example.
It's kind of like almost setting yourself up as if you were going to teach a master class around something and showcasing what your secret sauce is. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
I know within automation, there was a lot of system integrators that were using the word custom solutions. And I ticked one guy off because I was like, what does that mean? Well, it's custom to their needs. And I'm like, what are their needs? Like, how is it cost? And I'm like, because your competitor down the street is saying the same thing. And I was like, you gotta
Everybody
say something.
sells a high quality, innovative, industry leading product, and all of you are number one.
Yeah, it's like, who has the best coffee? I really want to know, like, who is the best coffee? Ayush is here. They say hi. Hi. Thank you for joining us. But yeah, so okay, you mentioned that you're going to automate and
Yes.
you guys are going to be showcasing, and you said that your booth number is 5415. So anybody that's
Yes.
going to automate, make sure you go say hi to Emily and CCS America at 5415. What other things are you working on other than the trade show? Because I know that can take up a lot of someone's time planning for a trade
Yeah.
show. And
Yeah. Um, I think if in-person events have been, like becoming a bigger part. I think people have, especially after COVID, we missed that in-person connection.
Mhm.
So I mentioned the technical roundtables and how we're like hoping to do more of those, not just like publicly, but we've also had requests to do them for like specific customers. So like do the for their teams internally. So we have a few of those planned as well. Um,
That's
yeah,
cool, like a training almost.
yeah, like doing the technical roundtable in private,
That's
essentially.
cool. That's
Yeah,
really interesting. I like
yeah.
that. And then anything else that you're working on outside of those?
Uh, I mean, personally, for me, I'm working on doing a little website refresh. So we like had ccsamerica.com is like the website that the US office manages. Like CCS has its own website that, um, the headquarters manages. But like this particular website, it was like there before I joined. I think they like, it was one of those ones where they made it in like 2001 and it
Oh
hadn't
no.
gotten a big update since then. And it was like at the point where, like nobody knew how to access it. And except for like our IT guy. And so every time we wanted to make a change to it, like we had to ask him, like, hey, could you like update this address or put this one picture on the website for us? And that just wasn't efficient. So I think
Yeah.
it was last year or the year before, like the technical market and I like redid the website. And it was like, you know, a really quick job. It was like done in 2 months because we wanted it to be in time for automate
Mhm.
of that year when we did it. So we were just like, let's just get like the basic, like barest of bones on the website, like who we are,
Yeah.
what do we do, how do you contact us, and like that was it. That's kind of where the website currently is now. So we wanted to like, so that's a project I'm currently working on. Go live date to be determined because
That's ex
Automate's just taking up my life right
Oh
now.
yeah. It's probably not the best time to kind of do a website facelift, but it can be a very daunting task, but it's exciting once everything's said and done and over with because it does help with everything that you need. And I don't know, it's just like driving a new car. Once you get it completed, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see that and looking forward to see how you guys make that new. Is there anything, so one of the things that, kind of being in the marketing space, it's a lot of learning, and I try to do what I can to really keep my skills up to date, whether that's reading like newsletters or taking HubSpot SEO courses or LinkedIn courses to really to keep up to date on things. Is there anything that you're doing or a new skill that you're trying to learn that really helps with your marketing skill set?
One skill working on probably like data analytics and reporting. Like we did not have like a proper functional CRM until like last year, was it? My sense of time might be off, but it's still relatively new and like, we're starting to,
Yeah.
add all our opportunities into it and track stuff like that. So, suddenly there's data there that wasn't available to us before. And, like we were just waiting for the moment where we could start to try and like track certain things. Because we didn't, have that system in place. So, you know, we might have looked up, how to report and things like that, or how to
Yeah.
pull this data from a CRM, but didn't have the chance to apply it. I think another important part to that is like, certain audiences within the organization, like we are now reporting like results to them, whereas like we didn't have to before. And, you the things that you report to each other internally in marketing does not necessarily equal the same stuff you would report on to like the rest of our US team versus like the team in Japan.
Yeah.
So now like we're figuring out how to like tailor those reports of like the same topic to different audiences because we don't want everybody's eyes to like glaze over when
Yeah.
marketing's talking.
That's really cool. I've worked in HubSpot a lot and I really like that platform, but it was there's so much data out there and you just have to have a strategy and goal in mind to like figure out which data is the most important to your company that hits your goals. But HubSpot was just a lot of fun because it automated a lot of the workflows that I needed. So I would just have to put those together and then like hit the start button. And it was just amazing how like things just quickly showed up and it was just like, oh, this all makes sense. And it just made things so much easier. Emily, our time is coming up now, but I wanted to ask you, for anybody that is considering looking into engineering and manufacturing, but they might think it's not the space for them, is there any advice that you would give them? Because you're one of many women who have fell into this kind of by accident. And I'm trying to make that not a thing. Like, I want people to be purposeful in the career pathway they choose. So is there any advice that you would give someone who might be hesitant to step into this space and not fall into it by accident?
Yeah. Um, I mean, look, I majored in international relations and East Asian studies, like, definitely not in the realm of anything STEM related. And you know, it probably took me like 2 to 2 to 3 years of studying to, like, get, above the, you know, if there's, like, 0 and level 1, I feel like I was able to, like, jump to a lot higher than that in just, like, that short amount of time. Um,
Mhm.
so, if I can do it, hopefully you can do it also. I think, if your company has a lot of training materials about, like, your
Mhm.
products or, like, how to operate your products, that could be, like, a great primer. Or, um, if there's certain industry associations, like A3 is one of the big ones in
Yeah.
manufacturing, and sometimes they have, like, um, you know, good, seminars that you can watch for free. There's a lot of stuff out there to, like, give you that good, like, basic primer, to
Yeah.
let you know, like, the really basic stuff. And, um, you don't have to, like, go searching for it yourself. If anything, it might turn into a good opportunity if, like, your company doesn't have, like, training materials or, like, sparse training materials. That kind of hits on another issue in the industry right now, is, like, all the expertise is, like, being retired out of the industry because people are, leaving and taking all their knowledge and experience with them. So if anything, that could be a, like,
Yeah.
really good starting place. And if you just join and, are looking for ideas of what could be, good content, like, that's a great starting point. And then it'll help you learn on the, like, uh, on the road as well.
Yeah, some of the older generations have amazing stories and why they got into this industry, and they got a lot of cool knowledge there. So don't be afraid to like ask for mentors. Well, Emily, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day and talking to us more about your journey into technical marketing, because it can be challenging, and it definitely has a lot of acronyms and complex information that can be hard to wrap your head around. So thank you for sharing your story. But anyone who wants to learn more about yourself or CCS America's, where is the best way to connect with you and how should they get a hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, I'm on there a lot. I'll definitely be on there a lot, just posting stuff at Automate when that happens in 2 weeks. So yeah, you can again see me there at booth 5415. Like, I keep stressing. As soon as I was, like, saying that, I was like, "Oh my God, is that the booth number again?" It is. It is the correct booth number. Oh, I'm so paranoid about getting it wrong.
Well, we'll
But
have it in the write up and stuff, and I'll be sure to put it in the comments on the post for this conversation so that people
yeah,
can
I'll
can
also be
find.
at the extra innings thing. I think I'll be there. I got a
Oh,
ticket at least, so hopefully I can see some people around there.
yeah.
Uh,
So for anyone tuning in that doesn't know what that is, Jake Hall and Chris Lukier are putting on this event. I don't know what day it is. I can include that in the write up as well, but it's called Extra Innings, and they like to throw amazing networking parties, and you will meet a ton of people that will benefit you. You will meet at least one great connection, if not more than one. But they're always fun to hang out with. So be sure to check out for that link. I'll share that link. I think they still have tickets available, but they tend to sell out of their
yeah,
stuff.
I think I saw Jake while he was here for the robotics conference that was happening in Boston this week, and he did say like they're almost at full, I think. So, and that's
That's
like hundreds of people, so it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know Chris is doing something really special too. So Mother's Day weekend on the 10th, he's going to be debuting his own manufacturing happy hour IPA. I'm not excited that it's an IPA because I'm not a fan of IPAs, but I told him I would try it. I was like, but if I make a weird face, it's not to insult you. I just don't generally like IPA beer. But he actually is going to be bringing that to Automate as well too. So I'm super excited for those guys. Well, Emily, thank you so much for joining us. If you had one ask for our audience, what would that ask be?
For technical marketing in general, or just
Can
in
be
general?
anything, just in general.
Yeah. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. No pitch slaps, but I love getting to know people in this industry, especially like I've connected with a lot of industrial marketers in recent years, and the struggles or like the intimidating factor is not just like the technical. There's all sorts of like challenges and opportunities to again kind of rebrand manufacturing as you know uh, a great option, not just for like career paths, but also just like helping these like 30-year-old companies remember what made them amazing 30 years ago, and rediscovering that, and then like putting that on the face of the company, and sharing that with the world, but not just saying we're amazing, cutting edge for 30 years. Changing the image up a little beyond that.
Yeah, I like the fact that people are making it more human because it's the humans behind the machines that make it
Yes,
work and behind the
exactly.
technology. So, well, Emily, thank you again to anyone who tuned in and commented. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate you. Automate is just like 9 or 8 days away. I cannot believe I'm saying that. It made me a little nauseous when I figured that out because I was traveling just last week and I can't believe it's around the corner, but I will definitely be there Monday through Wednesday. Wednesday, we have something really special planned. So if you want to know what that is, stop by the Siemens booth at noon. We are getting together for something really, really special. I don't want to give too much away, but Automation Ladies will be there. Ann Wyatt might be there. Sammy Birch from Mission Design might be there. Emily from Marketing Metal might be there. But it's going to be at noon at the Siemens booth. I will drop their booth number after this episode because I can't remember off the top of my head because it's too many members for me to recognize. But if you're going to be at Automate, please let me know. I'd love to connect, love to network. Same with Emily. Be sure to connect with her. And I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
This episode of Mavens has been sponsored by Fresh Horizons Group. Fresh Horizons Group is a family-run company that was founded on the premise of helping organizations and businesses better tell their story through high-quality branded apparel and promotional items. Freshen up your brand by contacting Fresh Horizons today at freshhorizonsgroup.com.